Hi, everybody. This is the podcast, Everything About Hockey. This podcast, I thought I'd have a little bit more fun. I thought I'd come up with a list for the 30 teams, the players of the all-time for each franchise. I want to pick 3 forwards, 2 defensemen, and a goaltender. Now, the forwards, I'm not going to worry about center, left wing, right wing. I'm going to just pick the top 3 forwards I think played for that particular franchise at that particular time. Now, the 2 franchises I'm not going to deal with is Seattle and Las Vegas because both those are 2 new teams. So I'm going to stick with the 30, I guess I call them 30 original teams, and see what happens there. The first team I'm going to go with is the Anaheim Ducks. Let's look at their first top 3 forwards, and then we'll look at their defensemen, all-time defensemen, and then we'll look at their all-time goaltender. The first forward I'm going to focus on is Paul Kariya. He played from 1994 to 2003. He was one of the original high draft picks of the Anaheim Ducks. Well, back then it was called the Anaheim Mighty Ducks when he was drafted. He had magic hands. They were unbelievable. During the dead puck era, which was the 90s, if you don't know anything about that, this is when defenses really kind of took over the NHL. They were called the trap and the left wing lock, which are defensive schemes that would basically clutch and grab and hold you up so you could not score. It was a very dull, boring time to watch hockey in the 90s because of that, thanks to Detroit and New Jersey. During his time he played in the NHL, Paul Kariya scored 669 points. But unfortunately, he was prone to concussions. He got one heck of a concussion by Scott Stevens in the 2003 Stanley Cup Finals that caused him to retire early, unfortunately. But if he wouldn't have had those concussion problems, he would have had a whole lot more scoring. The other person I'm going to pick is Teemu Selanne, the Finnish Flash. He was not only for the Ducks, for the whole entire NHL, he was a fun guy to watch. He had 2 stints with the Ducks. First, he played for the Ducks from 1996 to 2001. Then he returned in 2005, and he played until 2014. He scored 988 points for the Ducks. In the early years, he led the league in scoring twice. The last one I'm going to go with Ryan Getzlaf. He's the captain of the Ducks for a lot of years. He actually led them to a Stanley Cup with his leadership. He was a dominating center iceman. He could play the physical side, but he also had a good little scoring touch to him. For the all-time all-franchise list for the Ducks on Blue Line, I'm going to go with Chris Pronger. He's a Hall of Famer. He's a bruising defenseman. You didn't want to get in his way. He basically anchored the Blue Line that led that team to a Stanley Cup. He was the heart and soul of that Stanley Cup championship team. He played for the Ducks from 2006 to 2009. The next blue liner I'm going to go with, the other blue liner I'm going to go with is Scott Niedermayer. He was a smooth, unbelievable, silky smooth skater with a nice wrist shot. He could anchor a power play and still manage to play a solid defensive game, which is very rare for a really good offensive defenseman to still be able to play the defensive zone. He played for the Ducks from 2005 to 2010. This was a toughie with all the goaltendings, but I'm going to go with John Sebastian Giguère simply because what he did in the 2003 playoffs. Normally, whoever wins the playoff MVP normally wins a cup, but he actually won the Conn Smythe Trophy, but actually Anaheim did not win the cup that year. He was such an outstanding goaltender in the 2003 playoffs. But he was always an outstanding goaltender. That's why I'm picking him. He was a very high-end goaltender that you could always count on to make the big save at the right time. And very, very seldom did he give a bad goal. So that was my pick for the all-time Anaheim Mighty Ducks, or Anaheim Ducks, as you want to say now, team. Now, I've also got a YouTube channel. So if you don't really like this list as I'm going through it, log on to my YouTube channel. In the comments below, make a comment on what you don't like. I'd love to find out what you think of my list. Now let's look at the Arizona Coyotes. And also going to add the old Winnipeg Jets into this because they actually Winnipeg did move to Arizona. So I'm going to make this an Arizona/Winnipeg all-time franchise list. First person I'm going to put as forwards is obviously Teemu Selanne, the Finnish Flash. He played for this franchise from 1992 to 1996, and in his rookie year, he scored 76 goals, which is the best rookie performance in NHL history. So, I have to put him on the list. He also played during the Winnipeg Jets era. The next person I'm going to go with is Keith Tkachuk. He played from 1991 to 2001, so he both played for the Winnipeg Jets era, and he also played for the Arizona Coyotes time frame. He scored 623 goals total, and he hit the 50-goal mark several times in a single season. He's a true big power forward. They can win those 50-50 puck battles on the boards. He can play in front of the net. He was a complete player. He played all three zones with a real big physical presence. Of course, now his two sons are playing basically the exact same way he used to play. The last guy I'm going to go with is Shane Doan. He's been the heart and soul of this franchise for many years. He played from 1995 to 2007, so he played for the Winnipeg Jets franchise and also the Arizona Coyotes franchise. He scored 973 goals total for this franchise. He's a high-end center iceman for a lot of years. Then he also moved up into management, and now he's basically doing the exact same thing he did on the ice, off the ice, being a high-end, elite hockey executive. For the Blue Lines for all time, I'm going to go Teppo Numminen first. He played for the Winnipeg Jets, and he also played for the Arizona Coyotes. He played from 1988 to 2003. He scored 532 goals. Another fun fact about this is him and Shane Doan are the only players that have played 1,000 games with this franchise. The other blue liner I'm going to go with the all-time blue liner list is Keith Yandle. He's a high-end all-around defenseman. He played for the Coyotes from 2006 to 2015. For the all-time, all-franchise goaltenders, I'm going to go with Mike Smith. He played from 2010 to 2017. Now, he was never really a elite goaltender, but he was another one of those guys that was consistently good on really bad teams, and he kept the Coyotes in games. The next one I'm going to look at is the Calgary Flames, their all-time, all-franchise list. The first forward I'm going to look at is Theo Fleury. He was a little guy, but boy, he could play big. He played for the Flames from 1988 to 1999. He scored 830 points playing for the Flames. He also won a Stanley Cup playing for the Flames. Also, twice, he scored over 100 points in a season playing for the Flames. Now, my next forward is Joe McGinley. He played for the Flames from 1996 to 2013. He racked up 1,095 points. He was a high-end power forward. He could score at will. It was really fun watching him. The last one in my all-time all-Flames list for forwards is Joe Nieuwendyk. He's a Hall of Famer, but what makes him my list is his non-stop motor running all the time. He was just constantly after that puck, driving in the net, winning 50-50 piles off the boards. He was just relentless with getting that puck and scoring. He played for Flames from 1986 to 1995. Now let's look at the blue line. The first guy, obviously, Al McGinnis. The hardware he's won was Norris Trophy, Defenseman of the Year, Stanley Cup, and he also was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. He played for the Flames from 1981 to 1994. He had the most feared slap shot in NHL history. This thing was lethal. I remember watching him when he played for the St. Louis Blues, and he shot that puck, and he hit the goaltender's glove, and he actually broke fingers, multiple fingers, on the goaltender, and he tried to catch it with his glove. It was amazing. It was scary at times when he let that thing rip, and you knew there was players standing in front of the net. You knew that they could get some serious injuries if that puck hit him in the wrong spot. And now, of course, the other guy, Larry McDonald, he played for the Flames from 1981 to 1989. He won a cup with the Flames, but he was one of the NHL's most interesting characters you'd ever come across. Just watching interviews, you knew he enjoyed playing hockey. And, of course, the old hockey world was really rooting for him when he won that cup in 1989 with the Calgary Flames. Now, goaltending was another question mark here. I had two guys I could pick from, Kiprusoff and Mike Vernon. But I decided to go with Mike Vernon. The reason why is because he backstopped the Flames to the Cup Finals in 1986 and a Cup in 1989. He played for the Flames from 1982 to 1994, and then he came back again and played from 2000 to 2002. The next team I'm going to preview is the Chicago Blackhawks. Another one of those original 6 teams. First person I'm going to have for my forwards, for my all-time Hawks franchise forward list, is Bobby Hall. This guy had a tremendous slap shot. He played for the Hawks from 1957 to 1972. He scored 1,153 points during that career, and he won 6 Hart trophies as most valuable player in the league. He only won 1 Stanley Cup. I just find that always amazing. He was inducted in the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1983. The next obvious choice is Stan Mikita. He played for the Hawks from 1959 to 1980. He scored a whopping 1,467 points for the Hawks. He got 8 Hart trophies as most valuable player. He got 1 Stanley Cup. And he was also a Hockey Hall of Famer, inducted in 1983. And my last one on the list is not in Hall of Fame yet, but he'd definitely be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Of course, I'm talking about Patrick Kane. He's got multiple Stanley Cups with the Hawks. He's been a scoring leader for the Hawks. And he was a key member of the Hawks dynasty teams of the 90s. On the blue line, I'm going to go first with Chris Chelios, a do-it-all defenseman, extremely intense. He won a couple Norris trophies as Defenseman of the Year playing for the Hawks. He played for the Hawks from 1990 to 1999. The other guy is Duncan Keith. He was also a member of that multi-Stanley Cup team. He was anchored that blue line for all that cups. Now let's look at the goaltender that I'm picking for the all-time, all-franchise Chicago Blackhawks team. I'm going to go with Glenn Hall, simply because he was just a dominating goaltender in his time. Played for the Hawks for 10 years, 1957 to 1967. He won 5 Vezinas as goaltender of the year in that time frame of that 10 years. He also won 2 Stanley Cups in that 10-year period. And he also was inducted in the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1975. Okay, now let's look at the next team, which is the Colorado Avalanche. Now, I'm also going to take into consider the Quebec Nordiques into this history because they originally were the Quebec Nordiques and they moved to Colorado in 1995. First person I'm going to pick in the all-time Avalanche all-franchise team for forwards is Joe Sakic. He played for the franchise from 1988 to 2009, so he played for the Quebec Nordiques franchise and the Colorado Avalanche franchise. During that time frame, he scored 1,161 points. He got 4 Hart trophies during that time frame as most valuable player. He won 2 Stanley Cups in that time frame, and he was also inducted in the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2012. He was the heart and soul and the leader of those Cup teams in the late 90s and early 2000s. The next one on the list is going to be Peter Stastny. This guy was just a pure power forward, old school. He played for the Quebec Nordiques from 1980 to 1990. He was also the first rookie to score over 100 points in NHL history. And he did that in 1980-1981 season. He also got the Calder Cup that year as Rookie of the Year. But throughout his whole entire career, he was a legitimate scoring threat. That's why I want him on this list. Of course, the last forward I want on this all-time Avalanche forward list is Nate McGinnon. He led this team to another cup just a few years ago. Now let's look at the all-time Avalanche Nordiques defensive core. First one I'm going to go is Adam Foote. He anchored that blue line for the first 2 cups back in from from 1991 to 2005. The last one I'm going to go with is Cale McCord. He anchored the blue line for the last Stanley Cup they got. For goaltending on this all-time, all-franchise list for the Avalanche and the Quebec Nordiques is Patrick Waugh. He's an NHL legend at goal. He played for the Avalanche from 1995 to 2003. And in his career, he's won 6 Vezinas as goaltender of the year, 1 Conn Smythe as playoff MVP. He's won 4 Stanley Cups, and he's also a Hockey Hall of Famer, inducted in 2006. What makes him so special, though, is he's the one that actually perfected the butterfly goaltending technique that now, even today, goaltenders try to copy from. Now let's look at the next team, which is the Dallas Stars. They're also going to be including the Minnesota North Stars into this one because Minnesota franchise moved to Dallas in 1993. First person I'm going to put on the all-time, all-franchise list for the Dallas Stars is Mike Modano. He's been the face of this franchise way back in Minnesota, all the way into Dallas. He's the one that actually was one of the major forces that won that Stanley Cup for the Dallas Stars, their only Stanley Cup. He was one of the driving forces behind that. He played for this team from 1989 to 2010, and he scored a whopping 1,359 points. The next person on the list is Neil Broughton. He was a hometown boy. He played in high school in Minnesota. He went to the University of Minnesota to play college, and then he got a chance to play for the Minnesota North Stars. Of course, naturally, he was a fan favorite in Minnesota. He also was the first American-born player to get 100 points in the NHL in one season. He also led him to the 81 and 91 Cup Finals. He played for the Minnesota North Stars from 1981 to 1997. The third forward I'm going to pick is Brian Bellows. He played for the Minnesota North Stars from 1982 to 1992. And the reason why I'm going with him is he was such a highly skilled offensive forward that had an unbelievable shot. Now let's look at the blue liners. The guys I think are the all-time franchise blue liners for the Minnesota North Stars / Dallas Stars. Sergei Zubov is the guy I'm going to pick first. He's a pure offensive-minded defenseman. He ran the power play. They ended up getting him a Stanley Cup. He was just a great offensive defenseman. He played his whole entire career with the Dallas Stars in Dallas. He played from 1996 to 2009. The next person I'm going to go with is Darian Hatcher. He was a solid defensive defenseman that was really intelligent. He was able to read plays and break plays up with ease. He played for the Dallas Stars from 1991 to 2003. Now, goal, this was a tough one. I had 2 of them to pick from, Eddie Belfour or Marty Turco. Marty Turco actually had multiple 30-goal wins. He was the most consistent goaltender that the Dallas Stars had at the time. But Eddie Belfour actually is a Hall of Fame too, but he actually is the one that won the Stanley Cup. He actually backstopped him in that Stanley Cup winning team. So I'm going to go with, let's think. Eddie Belfour, because he did win a cup for this team. He played for this team from 1997 to 2002, and during his career, he was considered an elite goaltender. Now, I'm going to admit, I wasn't a fan of the guy when he was playing, but what he's accomplished during the Dallas Stars time frame, he deserves to be on the list. The next team is the Edmonton Oilers. Of course, this is a no-brainer, all-time, all-franchise list team. I mean, if you followed hockey, I mean, these names are just automatically going to be recognized. The first one, Wayne Gretzky. I mean, the great one, as he's referred to. I mean, he holds every offensive record in NHL history right now. He's just a legend. Naturally a Hall of Famer. He was inducted in the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1999, which I always got a laugh out of. He also got 4 cups, a couple with Edmonton. Also in his career, he's got 9 regular season MVPs and 2 playoff MVPs. He played for the Oilers from 1979 to 1988, and he racked up a total of 1,669 points. Then I'm going to go with his partner in crime, Mark Messier. He played from the Oilers from 1979 to 1991, and he racked up a total of 1,031 points. In his career, he has 6 Stanley Cups. He has 2 league MVPs and 1 playoff MVP, and he was inducted in the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2007. Of course, those two made the Edmonton Oilers dynasty of the 1980s. Let's look at the other forward I'm going to pick on this team, which is Connor McDavid. Right now he's playing in the NHL. He's a elite NHL All-Star, future Hall of Famer. He's got unbelievable foot speed. Now let's look at the Edmonton Oilers all-franchise, all-time blue liners. First one I'm going to go with is Paul Coffey. He played for the Oilers from 1980 to 1987. He racked up a total of 669 points. He was like a forward playing the blue line when he played for the Edmonton Oilers. He won Defenseman of the Year 3 times, and he won 4 cups in his career. And he was also inducted in the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2004. Like Messier and Gretzky, Coffey was a real fun guy to watch play hockey. These next 2 guys that I'm picking be on the team, the other defenseman and the goaltender. The defenseman is Kevin Lowe. This guy was a defensive defenseman on a highly skilled run-and-gun offensive-minded team. He was back there just to try to keep the puck out of the net, which was really hard to do considering that you had constantly 4 forwards, 3 forwards and a defenseman, Paul Coffey, in the offensive zone at all times. So that was been his always argument is he a superstar, elite, Hall of Fame defenseman because he was on a great group of teams, or was his skill worthy of that? I'm still going to put him on the team because of his resume, his cups he won. And then the goaltender, Grant Fuhr, you could have the same argument about him. If you look at his career goals against average and save percentage, which was his goals against average was 3.69, and his save percentage for his career was .883, which is not exactly overly impressive. But you also consider that he won multiple cups with the Edmonton Oilers back in the 1980s. And you look at what his job was. His job was just to make sure he didn't give up bad goals at critical times. He was going to give up goals. Like I said, you had 3 forwards and a defenseman in the offensive zone at all times. So, there was going to be times where he had breakaways and, 2-on-1s and where, he's going to be the only one back there trying to make those spectacular saves. But going with his resume and that cups he won, I'm going to put him on this all-time, all-franchise Edmonton Oilers list at goaltender. The next team I'm going to do is the Los Angeles Kings. Of course, their all-time, all-franchise list is going to start with Wayne Gretzky again, the unbelievably talented forward that's a Hockey Hall of Famer. Now, if you just listen to the earlier Edmonton Oilers preview, I'm not going to repeat the same thing all over again. He is the great one. So let's look at the next person on their list. I'm going to go with Luc Robitaille. Luc Robitaille basically was Wayne Gretzky's wingman during the time he played in L.A. And Luc Robitaille scored a total of 1,154 points during that time frame. He basically did all the dirty work, the stuff behind the boards, along the walls, in front of the net, that really made this team a cup contending team in L.A. Now, last player on this all-time, all-franchise team is Andrei Kopitar. He actually led this team. He was a driving force behind his team winning multiple Stanley Cups. He's an elite center iceman for this team. That's why I want to put him on this roster. Now let's look at the blue line for this team. I'm going to go with Drew Doughty and Rob Blake. Both of those guys are just anchors on the blue line when they played for the L.A. Kings. Of course, Drew Doughty is still playing for the Kings. But they basically led this team from the back end. A great physical presence that also contribute some offense to this team and run the power play if they needed. And then the last person, the goaltender, Jonathan Quick. He was a clutch goaltender that backstopped him to multiple Stanley Cups. He never really gave up bad goals during the playoffs when the LA Kings really needed it. Now let's look at the next team. The next one is going to be the Minnesota Wild. This is the expansion Minnesota Wild. They started in 2000. This team is kind of interesting, I found. I've tried to look for forwards, and I really couldn't find any really outstanding forwards. The best one I could find, and he did a really great job when he was playing for the Wild, was Marian Gaborik. He played for the Wild from 2000 to 2009. He scored 437 points playing for the Wild. He was a highly skilled winger. He played for him. The next one I'm going to go with is Zach Parise. He ended up being a very solid playmaking center iceman for the Wild. And then the last one I'm going to go with is Nico Koivu. But what's really interesting here is all those guys are really solid NHL players. But you got to consider this Wild team very seldom miss the playoffs. They're always in a playoff hunt, always really competitive. Yet I could have a hard time finding an elite superstar forward that played for the Minnesota Wild. I just found that quite interesting with how much talent this team always had on it. Now on the blue line, though, it's interesting because I think Ryan Suter was and still is an elite all-star, real stud defenseman that the Wild had on their team. He definitely would be a number one anchor for any NHL team. That's why I'm putting him in this all-time, all Minnesota Wild, all franchise team. The other one is going to be Willie Mitchell. I really think that he was underrated when he played for the Wild back in the early days. He was really a solid defenseman that anchored that blue line for those early years. But let's look at the goaltending. Now, goaltending was really quite interesting with this team. I had three guys to consider as the all-time, all-franchise goaltender. The three guys were, first one was Fernandez, and then I had to look at Rolliston. And the guy I decided to go with was Nicholas Backstrom. He played for the Wild from 2006 to 2016. His goal against average at that time was 2.48, and his save percentage was .915. So he put up some solid numbers while he was there, and he really was a stabilizing force in that crease. The next team I'm going to look at is the Nashville Predators. Now, Predators is kind of interesting because they had constant playoff appearances. They actually went to a cup final. So you would think they would have a high-end, elite forward I could focus on as their all-time, all-franchise team. But I really couldn't find that here. I did find a couple interesting guys, though. Philip Forsberg is the one that I'm really focused on first. He's a high-end, elite scoring winger for the team. And, of course, he's developing into one of the elite scorers for the Nashville Predators in their history. Another forward I'm going to focus on is Steve Sullivan. He played for the Predators he was another one of those clutch, high-end scoring wingers for the Predators when he did play for them. The next person is going to be Scott Walker. He played for the Predators from 1998 to 2006. He was actually one of the guys they got in the expansion draft. And I always liked his versatility. He could play anywhere up and down the line that you want, and he always did an outstanding job. He wasn't an elite scorer, but when you needed a goal, he was there to put that goal in. If you needed to get a puck off the boards, he was there to do that. He was just an all-around solid hockey player. But on blue line, this team has some really unbelievable talent in its franchise history. The first one I'm going to look at is Shea Weber. I was always impressed with this guy. This guy was a stud on the blue line when he played for the Nashville Predators. He played for the Predators from 2005 to 2016, and every year he was always a Norris Trophy, which is best defenseman, candidate every year. Then, of course, the other one's Roman Josi, another guy that is just a stud on the blue line again, always up for the Norris Trophy as best defenseman. He's another elite defenseman the Predators have. This is another team with a long line of stud goaltenders that I could pick from, but I'm going to go with Pekka Rinne. He was the one that I felt was the most consistent. He also won 2 Vezina trophies as best goaltender of the year while he was playing for the Predators. And he was also the only goaltender to lead the Predators to the Cup Finals. So he's definitely my pick as the all-time, all-franchise goaltender for this Nashville Predator team. The next team I'm going to look at is the St. Louis Blues. The first person on my all-time, all-franchise for the St. Louis Blues is Brent Hall, number 16, the Golden Brent. When Blues traded for him in 1988, he played from 1988 to 1998, by the way. I don't think they realized what kind of a scoring threat they had just acquired and how lethal that shot was. The first season they got him, he scored 41 goals. The next season they got him, he scored 72 goals. The year after that, 86 goals. The year after that, 70 goals. Not only did he have a lethal shot, he also had a great skill of actually finding open spots in the attacking zone. And he just kind of just slid into those spots, and the opposing team would just tend to forget about him. Wouldn't even realize he's there until he launched that rocket right into the net and turned that red light on. The next one is going to be Bernie Federko. He played for the Blues from 1976 to 1989. He scored 1,073 points. He had a total of 721 assists. This is a little fun fact about Bernie Federko. He's the first person in history to score 50 assists in 10 straight seasons. Of course, now he's also a Hall of Famer, but I always kind of felt like he was underrated for his playmaking ability. The last four I'm going to go with is Ryan O'Reilly, simply because he was the captain and leader of the only Stanley Cup championship St. Louis Blues team. And, of course, my prediction is when he does retire, he'll have his number hanging in the rafters in St. Louis. On the blue line, obviously, I'm going to go with Al McGinnis. Unbelievable shot. 100 miles an hour. It was scary watching him shoot that puck. I mean, if he hit anything, he would break it. He played for the Blues from 1994 to 2004. He did win a Norris Trophy as a St. Louis Blue, and he still holds all the offensive categories for defensemen as a St. Louis Blue. Also going down his NHL history, he's considered having one of the hardest shots as an NHL defenseman. The next one I'm going to go with is obviously Chris Pronger. He played for the St. Louis Blues from 1995 to 2004. He won multiple Norris Trophies as Best Defenseman of the Year. And he also won the Hart Trophy as the top player in the NHL in the 1999-2000 season. He was just a big, rough and tumble defenseman that other teams' forwards just didn't want to deal with. My goaltender for all-time, all-franchise list for St. Louis Blues is going to be Jordan Binnington. And, of course, the obvious reason is he was in net when the Blues won their only Stanley Cup. Obvious choice there. The next team I'm going to be for the all-time, all-franchise list will be for the San Jose Sharks, which has a really amazing amount of high-quality forwards for this team. Compared to like Nashville and Minnesota, I mean, you got players like Joe Thornton, Patrick Marleau, Joe Pavelski, Olin Nolan, and Logan Couture. So I was only forced to pick three of them for all-time, all San Jose Shark franchise team. So the first one I'm going to pick, first forward, I'm going to go with Joe Thornton. When you got an elite center iceman that scores 400 goals in NHL, you have to put him on the list. The second forward on the list is obviously going to be Patrick Marleau. He played from Sharks from 1997 to 2017. He racked up a total of 1,082 points. He was a speedy forward. He got 30 goals 7 times in his career. Then the last one's obviously going to be Joe Pavelski. He's another one of those high-end elite scorers the Sharks had. Then on the blue line, I'm going to go with, for the all-time, all-franchise list, Brent Burns. Now, he's a true top-pairing defenseman, but he also is one of the most interesting characters in the NHL history. He was just a fun interview to listen to. The last one is going to be Scott Hannon. He's a old-school defenseman. He played for the early years for the Sharks, 1989 to 2007. I just personally liked him because he was a steady, all-around defenseman. He wasn't great at one thing, but he was good at everything. A lot of times I have no problem at all finding goaltenders that I think definitely should be in the all-time, all-franchise list. But the Sharks had a hard time figuring this out. So I finally came up with my goaltender for the Sharks would be Evgeny Levakov. He did win the Calder Cup in 2000, and he also was a pretty steady presence in the crease during several playoff runs for the Sharks when he played for them from 2000 to 2010. What's interesting about him was he was a late draft pick that was kind of a really long shot. And remember, the Sharks at the time had a lot of goaltenders in their system that they could pick from. And he kind of just came up out of nowhere and had a really respectable career as a Shark. The next one on my list is going to be the Vancouver Canucks. This has always been a fun team for me to watch, too. The first person I'm going to go is the all-time, all-franchise forwards are Trevor Linden. He played for the Vancouver Canucks from 1988 to 1998. Then he returned in 2001 and played until 2008. He scored 733 points as a Vancouver Canuck. He was drafted second overall in 1988 as a scoring winger, but he never really developed into a pure scoring winger. He managed to develop more into just an all-around, high-end, number one center iceman that could do anything, kind of like what Steve Yzerman did in Detroit. Trevor Linden did the exact same thing in Vancouver, of course, except from winning all those cups that Yzerman did in Detroit. He built a career on hard work and strong leadership. The next forward is going to be Pavel Bure. Now, this guy was just pure speed, the Russian rocket. He had great hands, but he had lethal speed. He played from 1991 to 1998. He scored 478 points for the Vancouver Canucks in his career there. But one of the reasons why I picked him was he's one of the two groundbreaking Russians. Came into the league in the early 90s that really set the stage for the Russians, making a huge impact in the NHL today. You got to remember, Alexander McGillney and Pavel Bure both snuck out of Russia to be able to play in the NHL in the early 90s. Now, the last forwards I'm going to go with for the all-time, all-franchise list, I only got one spot left, but I got two people I want to pick. And since they're both brothers and they're both twins, I figured I could go ahead and just put them in one spot. I'm talking about Henry and Daniel Sedin. Daniel had the underrated shot, and Henrik had and since they were both twins, they seemed to have this telepathic chemistry with each other, just know where the other one was on the ice. It was really quite amazing. So in this list, for the Sedin twins, are going to take up one spot on my forward all-time, all-Canucks franchise forward list. Now let's look at the defensemen. First person I'm going to go with Matthias Olin. He's a big, physical, bruising defenseman. Played for the Vancouver Canucks from 1997 to 2009. I'm going to go with Ed Jovanovski, Jovocop, as my other defenseman. He was a Vancouver Canuck from 1999 to 2006. Another big, physical defenseman. Now I'm going to go with a Hall of Famer, Roberto Luongo, as my goaltender for the Vancouver Canucks all-time, all-franchise list. He played for the Vancouver Canucks from 2006 to 2014. He was an elite regular season goaltender, but unfortunately, playoffs were always his downfall. He could never get it done in the playoffs, but I'm still putting him on this list because of his regular season performance. The last team on this list is going to be the Winnipeg Jets. Now, I'm also going to including the Atlanta Thrashers into their history because they originally were the Atlanta Thrashers. Then they moved to Winnipeg in 2011. Now let's start looking at their all-time, all-franchise forward list. The first forward I'm going to pick is, I'm going to go back to the Atlanta Thrasher days, and Ilya Kovalchuk. He'll be my first forward. He was a first overall pick. He played for the Atlanta Thrashers from 2001 to 2010. For the Atlanta Thrashers, he scored 615 points. He was a Calder Cup finalist his rookie year. And he also won the Rocket Richard Trophy his third year as the top scorer in the league. Unfortunately, he felt he was underrated because of the market he was in, and he felt that if he was in a bigger market, that pure scorer would be one of the faces in the NHL. The next forward I'm going to go with is Blake Wheeler. He's a big, strong center iceman. He was the captain of the Winnipeg Jets and one of the highest scorers on that team while he was actually playing for the team. He had 4 20-goal seasons while he was playing for the Winnipeg Jets. And then the last forward I want to put on the all-time, all-franchise list is Mark Scheifele. Here he right now is the current captain of the Winnipeg Jets. is an elite center iceman that's a point-per-game guy. He came on board in 2011 and now is still presently with the Winnipeg Jets. To start on my all-time, all-franchise blue liners is a 6'5", 260-pound defenseman. Goes by the name of Dustin Byfuglien. Big buff. He laid the big boom whenever he hit you. It was amazing watching him play. And also, the great thing about him was they also could play him at wing at the power play, and he stood in front of the net, and he blocked everything. He was an unbelievable screen in front of the net. And, of course, naturally, none of the defensemen could move him out of the way. The other defenseman I'm picking is Jika Trouba, another big, powerful defenseman. He's a defenseman that can play all three zones at a high level. For the all-time, all-franchise goaltender, I'm going to go with Connor Hellebuck. He won a Vezina Trophy as top goaltender of the year in 2020, and every year he's in a discussion of being a finalist for the Vezina. It's a no-brainer. He's an elite workhorse goaltender that keeps the Winnipeg Jets in games. He became a Winnipeg Jet in 2015, and he's still one at present time. Even though I was supposed to end here, I thought just for laughs and giggles, I'd just go ahead and look at the Vegas Golden Knights and just see what kind of players they have for their future all-time, all-franchise list. Remember, they're still a very young team. But first person I like to look at, and I think should be recommended for this team in the future, I'm going to go with the last year's playoff MVP and a regular leader on this team, Jonathan Marchessault. And he was also picked in the expansion draft from Florida when his team first came into play. Then, of course, the fans of the Golden Knights called that first expansion team players misfits. So he's been tagged as an original misfit. Then for the blue line, I'm going to go with Shea Theodore as a really high candidate for an all-time, all-franchise list. He's an elite, high-end, do-it-all defenseman. Other players I'm interested in seeing how they fall in there is, for example, William Karlsson, Wild Bill. He came from Columbus. He was based in Columbus, a third-line checking forward. In his first years in Vegas, he became a really high-end number one center, scoring center iceman. And he also was an original misfit, too. Then, of course, you have to consider Jack Eichel, the number one center iceman for this Stanley Cup winning team. He's definitely going to be considered one of the elite all-time forwards for the Vegas Golden Knights all-franchise team when this team comes about. Then you also got to consider for goaltender, one of the most popular players early on, actually the most popular player early on when they came to the expansion draft in the first couple of years, and that's M.A. Fleury. Where is he going to fit in on this all-franchise team? Then, of course, now I'm recording this to see how Kraken's only a couple years old, so I can't really even start to evaluate those players yet. But I hope you enjoyed this podcast actually, of the all-time, all-franchise players list for the Western Conference of the NHL. My personal pick of what I think are the best players playing at that point in time in their careers for these particular franchises. Thanks a lot. This is Everything About Hockey.